The time has finally come to get this engine started in the car. This is my 912 engine in a 911. I mean, it's pretty much a 912 at this point, but either way, let's get it started.
Garage time.
Well, those fenders aren't 912. Since last week, there's been a whole lot of activity done here on the car. I put the engine in last week. Since then, I've basically been connecting stuff and wiring, and I'll give you a quick rundown of some of the highlights of things I've done throughout the week. But we all want to see it run, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of minute details. There's a lot of I's to dot, a lot of T's to cross. If any of you have any questions on some of the custom stuff that was done that I'll show you today, just let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to dive into that with a little more detail. But it's almost time to turn the key and let her rip. Okay, first thing I had to do was install these heater flappers, part of the engine cooling tin. That required removing the muffler, unfortunately. Then I lengthened the oil lines that run to the remote oil filter. Plus I added some fire sleeve on them because they're very close to the exhaust headers. The driver's side heater box did require a hole to be drilled for the oil line to pass through. Here's the oil lines finished up underneath the car. Then I made this clamp that actually supports the rear engine tin shelf. It's a little floppy without support, and the stock system uses some tabs off the muffler, so I had to create my own. Out of the rubber clutch boot. This is the starter relay wrapped in a bicycle inner tube and tied up right next to the stock harness. Added the ground straps. And this is a new wire harness in the engine bay. Also did the oil lines for the smaller filter. Then I added a relay for the fuel pump. This wire harness here is new, and you can see the coil right now is disconnected. That is on purpose. I want to build oil pressure in the engine before we let it fire up. So let's get that done. Also, there's a wire that goes here. Behind the distributor, there is a pressure sensor, and it will tell you, it's like an idiot light, it'll tell you if your engine is low on oil pressure. I've also put a gauge in the dashboard. They're not really functional. The only thing I've wired up so far is this oil light. So when I turn the key to the run position, this light will turn on. When the engine builds oil pressure, that light should go out. And that's really the only thing I need to know is, do I have oil pressure or not? I've already measured oil pressure before when it was on the test stand, so I think the engine is okay. I just want to know if an oil line have a major leak, or if something goes wrong with the oil pressure, I'll know right away so I can shut it down. Okay, it's time to turn the key and try to build some oil pressure. Now this is the fuel pump relay. I took it out, so the fuel pump isn't going to run. All I'm trying to do now is build oil pressure. So here we go. There's the red light. It's cranking. and give the starter a break. There's a lot of oil volume to fill up in that remote oil filter. Let's try again. There we go. The light is out, so we have oil pressure. And it just came back on. So it takes a little while for the oil pressure to bleed off, but we now have the engine primed and ready to run. So at this point, I'm gonna put the fuel pump relay back in, and then we'll get some fuel pressure. Then we'll connect the coil and see if it starts. Okay, now the fuel pump is on. I don't know if you can hear it. The hood's open, so it's a little loud. So give it a few seconds to fill up the carburetors. So the camera actually makes it easier to see down here. So I'm going to give it a squirt or give it a pump. I don't know if you can see on this side right here, there's the nozzle. So I can see a stream coming out. I'm going to set a few things up here so we can get the timing done. This is a tach and dwell meter. Okay, here's the timing light. That's cylinder number 1. And I think rather than stack too many things on here, I don't want these to short out. So I have a wire that'll kind of get that out of the engine bay so there's no risk of short circuit. And both these can just connect out here. There we go. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these idle stops. I'm going to turn them 2 turns because I don't want this engine to go below 2,000 RPM because the cam and the lifters are still breaking in. So I want to make sure they get lots of oil. Okay, this is it, moment of truth. I'm just going to do 1 pump and let's turn the key. Oil pump, lights on. Wants to go. Well, it's running, but I think it's only running on one side. I don't see any squirting coming out of this side. Let me check the back one. I need to get a mirror. Nope, this carburetor is dry. Okay, I think the float on this one is probably stuck, so I'm gonna have to pull this one apart. These have been sitting a long time, so I'm not surprised the floats are stuck. Now when I pull this fuel line off, there should be a little bit of fuel in there. It's connected right here to the regulator, so that's step number 1. Here we go. Yep, so a little splash of fuel came out. Not much. So I'm gonna keep this up high so it doesn't all leak out. Got fuel pressure. I just think that the float itself might be stuck. So you can see there is fuel in the fuel bowl. So that means that at least the accelerator jets are clogged and probably the idle jets, maybe the main jets. So now we just kind of go through some of the jets and see if it's working. The needle valve is moving. So this doesn't appear to be stuck, and the fact that there is fuel in the bowl means this part's not the problem. This is the accelerator pump nozzle. So we'll verify that this is clear. This is a really tiny hole in here. So I'm giving the pump lever a few pulses, and I'm seeing the level inside those chambers going up and down. So it looks like the pump diaphragm is probably okay. Just gonna give this a little squirt. Hopefully it doesn't get all over the camera. Back up just a little bit. Yeah, this is open. Yep, also open. Now this is the one that has the tiny hole. So if anything's clogged, it's gonna be this one. Yeah, I think I'm getting something out of there. I don't know if you can see it squirting. That's good. Yep, now it's working. So I'm just going to carefully put these back in. Okay, let's give it another try. Now I'm going to disconnect the linkage because I don't want to dump a bunch of fuel from that side. Okay, now they're both squirting. Okay, just watch right there. Okay, but while I'm here, now that these are functioning, I'm gonna pull out the main jets and also the idle jets and just make sure they're clear too. Okay, next up are the idle jets. They're right here on the side. Pull these guys out. That one might have been clogged, but it's working now. Okay, this gasket's still in one piece, so I'm just gonna put it right back together. Back together. There's no missing nuts or extra nuts or anything falling down the carburetor, so I think it's time to give it another try. Everything's connected, the fuel line is tight, so let's go. It runs. A little smoky, and it looks like I might have an oil leak underneath. So I need to look at the oil lines that go to the remote oil cooler. But it is running. It was running a little fast. It is too far advanced. I saw over 35 degrees on max advanced, and that was only at like 3,000, 2,500. So I'm gonna loosen the distributor, look underneath and see what kind of things we got underneath here. The first thing I see is a little oil puddle down here, right underneath the bumper. That's where the remote oil filter is, so we gotta check into that. Something is up with those lines. It's leaking a little bit. Okay, I think I found the source of the oil leak. This plug was loose in the oil filter console. There's really 2 inlets and 1 outlet. So the inlets can be configured from the top or the bottom, and this was just finger tight in there with no sealant on it or thread tape. So I'm gonna seal it up with some thread tape, put it back in, and that should fix that. Okay, this time I'm gonna loosen the distributor first. Just a little bit. Voila, I'm happy with it. It's running well enough now. I got the timing dialed back. It was up like 38 degrees. And so I had marks between 30 and 35. So I think I was able to get it to 32, maybe 31. I want to put this engine under some load to try to do a good job breaking in the rings. So, next step is to get it on the road, and that just means I'm almost ready. I just have to go through the car and tighten bolts. Just like I forgot the oil filter plug, there's tons of stuff like that in the car that's just finger tight. I think the 356 behind me is just a little bit jealous. This is a 356 engine. The 912 engine, 356 engines are basically the same engine. And this car has been patiently waiting for its engine. This is not it. I have another engine for this, and I also have a numbers matching engine for that car, also going to be rebuilt. So this probably is making this car a little mad. This is another big milestone for me. This engine was purchased some maybe 15 years ago, and I was not the one to take it apart. I bought it unassembled, and someone had already started on the short block rebuild. So the crankshaft, the cam, the oil pump, all that stuff had been buttoned up. And I've always been concerned about the level of build quality on the lower end. And I've also been concerned about the cleanliness. So because it's been stored and moved around so much, I ended up running several gallons of oil through, just directly through the oil pump and the bearings, trying to purge out any debris that might be in there. So this engine has always been a little bit of a wild card for me, but everything I've looked into seems to check out. Like, I took the rod bearings off and the clearances were spot on that. It's a standard bearing, standard crank. Everything is checked out pretty well, and I'm just crossing my fingers it's going to be a runner for a little while. This is a temporary engine for this car, but I want to get some miles out of it and enjoy it while, by the time I get my other engine. I don't even have another engine for it yet.